First item of business, as always, is requests for bill introductions. Do we have any requests? Seeing none, we will move on to our first item of business for today, hearing on House Bill 2265, and we would like to welcome to committee Reviser Amelia Donovan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, members of the House Committee, House Bill number 2265 provides a sales tax exemption from the state sales tax for all sales of textbooks purchased by a student that are required for classes held by a public or private post-secondary educational institution, if such sales were made by the institution itself or a bookstore operating on the institution's behalf. In addition, cities and counties would continue to impose their sales tax on such transactions. And I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? That's quite possibly the quickest explanation of a bill that is that long. Maybe not. Thank you, Amelia. Committee, we would now turn to the fiscal note. Do we have anyone from Department of Revenue that would like to address the fiscal note?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is Kathleen Smith with the Kansas Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue is estimating that House Bill 2265 would decrease state revenues by $5.6 million in fiscal year 22. Of that, the state general fund would be estimated to decrease by $4.7 million in fiscal year 22, and the state highway fund by $900,000 in fiscal year 22. And the same estimate would have similar results in the outgoing years. To come up with that estimate, we had looked at different sources of data and found that the average annual cost of books and supplies for a full-time undergraduate was around $1,298. We also found a head count of people that were in college for the last couple of years, and it was around 265,000. We made the assumption that of that $1,298, of which the student spends, we assumed that 25% of that would go to books. And so that's how we kind of came up with our estimate of the 5.6 million. One note that I would make, the way that the bill is designed, it would or could potentially put us out of compliance with the streamlined sales tax agreement. And so there could be a potential loss of around $41 million if we were to be found out of compliance. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Did you say $41 million?
That would put,
streamline?
That's how much we get through the streamline agreement. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many students purchase their books from other sources rather than the institution's bookstore from the institution. Did you factor that in to your equation at all?
Yes, we did, Representative.
So how much do you estimate that the purchases that wouldn't apply to this bill?
Mr. Amy Kramer could provide a little bit of insight into this, if that would be all right.
Certainly.
Chairman, in previous years, when we've looked at similar bill that would exempt all textbooks, whether they were purchased from the school's bookstore or from another bookseller, we've used a 25. We've increased that estimate from 25% to 50%. Since this bill designated just the school's bookstore, I reduced that down to 25%.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kathleen, what's the chance that we would be found out of compliance with the streamlined sales tax? That's kind of a big number.
How I don't know what the chance is that we would be found out of compliance, but I can explain why we put that statement in there. The streamlined sales tax agreement specifically excludes certain things from the state and local tax base, which is things like motor vehicles and utilities, which are things that Kansas does have some varying tax laws on. And in addition, the streamlined sales tax agreement allows states to set a separate state rate, which may be 0, on food ingredients, and drugs. And so since textbooks are not specifically excluded from the tax base, and since they are not food ingredients, or drugs, then the tax treatment at the state level would need to be the same as the tax treatment as at the local level.
Thank you.
Next question, Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question just deals with the final paragraph of the fiscal note. It mentions that local sales tax collections could be impacted, but the bill brief points out that local sales taxes would still be included. So this just applies to state tax. I'm just wondering if that might have been carried over from the previous time this has been introduced, but this bill was specifically written to only apply to state sales taxes.
Maybe that they.
I think that the way the fiscal note is written, I think the Kansas Association of Counties and the League of Kansas Municipalities are the ones that are indicating that there could be a net reduction to local sales tax collections. So I would ask for them to speak to that if that would be all right.
Yes. Yeah. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for the overview on the fiscal note. And we will move on to the proponent section of testimony, and I would like to welcome first to committee Representative Brandon Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, colleagues. You have my testimony, so I don't want to read all of that, but just here to appear in support of House Bill 2265. While I'm standing here today as one of your colleagues, I've been part of this conversation since my time as the student body vice president at the University of Kansas, which got me excited about being in this building, and here we are today. I think we'll hear from several of the student organizations, student leadership organizations from our different institutions, and so I want to be sure to leave that time for them. But did want to point out that when we were crafting this bill, we did, with the intention of lowering the fiscal note compared to previous years, did make it applicable just to university and community college affiliated bookstores. Of course, we don't want to do anything that could potentially risk our involvement with the streamlined sales tax agreement. And so if we were to work this bill, I would definitely see that as a friendly amendment to ease those concerns, with the understanding that we know that would increase the fiscal note. So we wanted to make sure that it did that, as well as to satisfy some of the opposition we've seen in previous years. We made this only apply to state sales taxes versus locals, because we want to make sure that they have that control over deciding whether or not to tax those. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, committee. I think we'll go ahead and take questions at this time. Is there any questions for this conferee? Representative Sanders.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, ballpark figure, what percentage of your books did you purchase through the university or the university bookstore versus other sources?
Thank you, Representative, for the question. While it has been very fast years since I've been on a college campus as a student, but I did purchase my books directly through the university bookstore. Yes.
Committee, any other questions? See none, thank you for your.
Thank you.
Our next proponent is Faith Lopez, a student at KU and State Relations Coordinator for the Student Legislative Action Committee. She is joining us WebEx.
Good afternoon, legislators. My name is Faith Lopez, and I am a student at the University of Kansas, and I'm also serving as a State Relations Coordinator for the Student Legislative Action Committee. Thank you to the Chair, Representative Smith, and the other legislators for allowing a hearing over this important legislation before you today. It is relevant to college affordability, the increasingly high cost of textbooks. Based on results on a survey conducted in 2019 by a K-Board Student Advisory Committee over textbook affordability, the majority of students are spending well over $500 on textbooks each semester, using that $500 amount on average, and the sales tax being 6.5% in the state of Kansas. That equates to roughly $32 that could be better used to put towards groceries, gas, or even housing. For myself, moving from Leavenworth to Lawrence, it was already an overwhelming experience, especially entering freshman year in a pandemic. I'm a full-time student taking 18 credit hours while also working a part-time job. And the total cost of going to KU still makes my stomach churn. Financial aid does help me and many other students afford to attend college. But when looking at the K-Board survey I mentioned earlier, over 2/3 of the K-Board students indicated that they do not use financial aid to cover the cost of textbooks. However, the educational environment provided by KU is astounding. And I know that this experience in higher education will be a transformative opportunity for me and thousands of my fellow other students in college. That is why the issue of affordability is important, because students are endeavoring to better themselves through education, and the cost of it can often be too high and too much. I will continue my education while advocating for now, and in the future, college is made more affordable for those seeking a higher education in the great state of Kansas. Passing House Bill 2265 is a step in the right direction on behalf of college students in Kansas. Every dollar that you save students is a dollar that goes into their bills, the cost of living, and helps ensure that you are saving student taxpayers' money. The money students would save from passing House Bill 2265, they would end up putting right back into the local economy. Thousands of Kansans, out-of-state, and international students pursue their education in the state of Kansas. They live and spend their money in our communities, and in turn, cities and countries benefit from the increased sales tax revenue from students living in our community. Legislators should recognize the economic contributions of college students in this state and help lift some of the tax burden placed upon them, specifically by removing sales taxes on textbooks. This problem is so significant that our student governments from around the state have drafted resolutions to pass through our Student Senate supporting House Bill 2265, KU Medical School Senate, KU Student Senate, WSU Student Senate, Washburn Student Senate, and Pitt State University have all successfully passed this resolution, and other universities will be voting on it soon. From discussions with leaderships, it is certainly clear that there is a widespread support from House Bill 2265 among college students across the state. Thank you, legislators, for your public service and being advocates for college affordability. And please reach out if you have any questions or would like to talk about this issue further. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions for this conferee? Seeing none, thank you again for your testimony today. Our next proponent testimony is from Kathleen Short, also joining us via WebEx, representing the Chief of Staff for the Wichita State Student Government Council.
Good afternoon, representatives. My name is Kathleen Short, and I am the Chief of Staff for the Wichita State Student Government Association. During our last Senate meeting, a resolution in support of this bill was proposed and passed by the Student Senate with unanimous consent. Our senators know our students, and our students are struggling with the cost of college. House Bill 2265 would allow a slight alleviation of that cost, and the money saved can benefit students in a myriad of ways. According to a WSU cost of attendance calculator, students spend about $1,250 on books and supplies per year. Sales tax on that is roughly $80. Those $80 could be spent on groceries, prescription medicine, or even their tuition. Especially now during the coronavirus pandemic, Kansans are struggling financially. Our students are facing a financial crisis and a health crisis and attempting to learn through it all. We at Wichita State Student Government are doing what we can to advocate for our students, and we believe that the passing of House Bill 2265 would aid in the accessibility of college. Students across Kansas would, without a doubt, benefit from the passage of this bill. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to our next proponent. I'd like to welcome to committee Tell Whitmer, Kansas State University Student Governing Association. That's fine, yes.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. If anything, you got me out of class, so it's a lot of fun. It's a fun day to be here in Topeka for me. But I'm a history teacher by training and kind of a history nerd, so I just want you to bear with me for a moment as I take you back to 1863. So just for a brief moment, I want to go back to the middle of the Civil War. Just 2 years before 1863 and 1861, we've had three disastrous constitutional conventions in our state, and finally, with the third one, we accept a constitution and are admitted into the Union as the 34th state with free soil. It's a really turbulent time, right? Right before that, the Kansas-Nebraska Act's passed. We have settlers flooding into the state from the north and the south to determine the trajectory of the state. People are dueling and dying. Lawrence is burned to the ground, and I see my student body vice president colleague from the University of Kansas cringing at that statement. But it'd be really weird to see that something like that happening today, as much as I like the metaphorical reading of that statement. But in the midst of all that violence and chaos culminating with the start of the Civil War, in 1862, the Morrill Act is passed, and land-grant universities and colleges are established in the North. And I can only imagine what the Southerners are saying at this time. They're probably saying, that's fake news. There's no way they can pass monumental legislation like that. But we did, and a year later in 1863, Kansas State is established as the first operational land-grant institution in the country. So why does that matter? Well, it matters because we're very literally, my institution that I represent, the students in my college, represent this Western frontier ideal of Abraham Lincoln's vision for opportunity, access, and education to really the common man and woman. And K-State's really unique in that way. So we're very literally this institution offering social mobility and access to individuals. And that's the case for me, and that's certainly our history, and that's why I told that brief story to get us to this point. But the reality is it's become increasingly hard to do that and fulfill that mission. And it looks like it's just going to continue to get harder and harder to live up to our land-grant goals. So we know that college costs have been rising and climbing for some time, and we can spend a lot of hours debating that. There's a lot of reasons, and that's definitely worthy of debate. But one thing's for sure, in today's economy, and we can quantify this in a lot of research today, there's nothing more important in terms of moving up in social mobility and earning wages than post-secondary training or education. And colleges, because it's increasingly unaffordable and out of reach for the very people my institution represents, I think this bill would go a long way, make a small difference, but a big impact in the lives of those students who my institution was created to help the most. So we know textbook prices have become outrageous. Recent data from the College Board indicates that an undergraduate student at four-year colleges will spend over $1,000 during their course in university pursuing their degree on textbooks and resources. And I undoubtedly think this bill would go a long way to alleviating those costs and that burden for families and their students. So from someone like me, I can speak from my own experience. I'm the son of two rural Kansas educators and someone who grew up on the ragged edge of the middle class. Had I not been fortunate enough to receive those generous amounts of private scholarship dollars, I probably wouldn't be here today or have the number of opportunities that I've had as a student at Kansas State to be able to lead and to represent students in this way. So I know my colleagues from the University of Kansas just spoke on a lot of the data from the Board of Regents Student Advisory Committee, where we were able to collect that data from the universities across the Board of Regents institutions in 2019, and that data deserves to be wrestled with. But I do want to highlight, before my time concludes, the things we have to do at K-State and the things we're really good at in terms of keeping students on campus who are really struggling. So I'd like to highlight some of that information. We have a really strong student philanthropy at the university, or Kansas State University, as a part of our foundation that allocates student opportunity awards and scholarships to students to remain on campus when they're struggling, either due to social or financial situations. And through our philanthropic t-shirt campaign, K-State Proud, which this is anecdotal, so bear with me, I know I'm talking a lot, but my University of Kansas student body president colleague did lose a bet in the Sunflower Showdown this fall and had to wear a K-State Proud sweatshirt on his campus for a day, and there were quite a few obscenities from his constituents thrown at him, so I guess that's a nice entry into politics, but that was quite a scene to see. Anyway, we've been able to award more than $1.3 million to our students on campus. Just last year, in last fiscal year, school year, 212 students applied for these awards, and we awarded over $260,000 to those students to make sure that they can stay on campus and continue their education and aspirational goals after they've concluded their time at K-State. So far this year, we've seen 130 students apply. There's no doubt, especially the pandemic has highlighted a lot of challenges facing students in addition to their resources and textbooks that they have to pay for. And we've awarded 65 students thus far about $70,000 to continue their studies. So that textbook data that this University of Kansas colleagues mentioned earlier went towards our efforts to develop an open alternative textbooks initiative. And that's something we're really passionate about. We've built a lot of community support with our faculty and administrations on an open alternative textbook initiative. We call it Textbooks 2.0. This March, on March 24th, we'll have a philanthropic all-in for K-State Day. We were able to do this 2 years ago for our Cat's Cupboard Food Pantry, where we raised $9 million, I think, to go towards food insecurity on our campus, and we're going to do that again this year to raise money for this Open Alternatives Textbook Initiative that goes towards grants for faculty and instructors to develop open and alternative resources to the standard textbook. So we're doing something about this, but there's no doubt that we have a long ways to go, especially in our Board of Regents institutions. So, to be sure, the measures in this bill won't solve every financial challenge, especially related to textbooks and financial access to post-secondary education. But this bill's passage would certainly assist us in our current efforts, like our open and alternative textbook initiatives that we have at our university, and will continue to help those same struggling students that I mentioned that we put a lot of effort as students in our philanthropic efforts to keep on campus. So, 1863, our mission then was the same as it is today, and that's to provide opportunity, access, and education to the common person, those who need it the most, people like me from rural Kansas and from the state and surrounding regions. And I urge you to pass this bill to make that small difference in the lives of students and those who need it the most. So thank you so much. Thank you for bearing with me. I appreciate the time to talk to you today.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Helgerson.
I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I have one question that's occurred to me. You were up, and I apologize ahead of time. How many students have federal loans?
I'm afraid I don't know that information.
I think it would be helpful for us, especially with the federal government giving possibly $10,000 in loans back per individual, how that equates with this bill. Balancing all the things, those individuals that have loans are going to be able to write off possibly $10,000, and some individuals want to write off up to $50,000. Not that it's all the same, and not that it carries forward, because you have to pay your debts now, but the money's going to come from somewhere on ours. whether or not it's $5 million we take out of spending for universities, or whether or not it's $5 million we're going to give directly to the students. So I'd ask that of all the people if they give the information.
Committee, any further questions? I just have one. Was there a friendly wager on the Sunflower Showdown this spring?
So I got out of that. I did. So lucky me, but
Thank you for your
thank you
testimony.
very much.
Committee, the next proponent I show is William Barfield, joining us via WebEx. William is the Fort Hays State University student and senator in the Student Government Association.
Hello. One moment. I have a statement to read from. Distinguished member of the House. Paying for textbooks was the second largest economic stressor for students, falling second only to paying tuition in a study by Cengage. Over the past few decades, textbook prices have skyrocketed alongside the price of attending college. And although this bill does not aim to fix those massive problems, the push for a tax exemption on college textbooks exists within the much larger conversation growing from the crossroads of higher education, affordability, and the future of young Kansans that must be had. Speaking as a current student and a senator in the Student Government Association at Fort Hays State University, our college is known for putting economic accessibility first for students. As a result, many of our students come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and have fewer traditional financial supports. Looking through that lens, when we talk about textbooks in the 21st century, what we're really talking about is a barrier to education, which should be a tool that unlocks discussion, brings expert insights, and takes curriculum to a heightened level, has become a financial stressor that forces students to decide between groceries for the week or the book they will need to write all of their essays in class. It's forcing a decision for a single mom between taking care of her own child or buying the $100 access code that cannot be bypassed as it unlocks all of her homework for the semester. These students, I know, and that I have heard from. Friends who have what is amounting to a full-time job are juggling 15 credit hours and don't know what to do when the semester starts, as $300 in textbook fees are due to be paid within the week. The least we can do is alleviate the tax burden on these students to make those resources more affordable. And it makes economic sense to do so, as the aim of taxation is to fund programs for the general welfare, to help government function, and to benefit the people. When we add a tax onto what is already a barrier, we must realize that it's doing more harm than good and is antithetical to the purpose of taxation. Sitting on the Open Educational Resource Committee at my university has opened my eyes to the gross problems, but also promising solutions regarding textbooks and higher education. We have to do better for Kansans to combat the inaccessibility of college education, also needing to work harder to incentivize students to stay in-state for college, reducing the brain drain of our brightest, and retaining our most promising assets to grow our great state into the future. This is but one step in that marathon, but it is a step in the right direction. I urge you all to consider it as such and to put more of your time and effort into spearheading the solutions which seek to fulfill our education system to its greatest potential. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions for this conferee? Seeing none, thank you again for your testimony. Committee, I'd like to address your attention to written-only testimony from Representative Nick Hoheisel and Matt Lindsay, the president of the Kansas Independent College Association. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent for House Bill 2265? Seeing none, we will close that portion. Committee, I do not have anyone scheduled for neutral or opposing testimony. Is there anyone wishing to appear as an opponent or neutral? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2265. And while we are switching gears, I will return to the order of business, introduction of bills, and recognize Representative Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a bill to introduce. It's 21 RS 1255, and it's an enhancement to the ROS program that there has been, of course, movements after there were suggestions made last year. This is to work on that ROS enhancement.
Very good. Committee, any questions for Representative Kelly? Seeing none, is there any objection to the request? Seeing none, the request is approved. Committee, we will now turn to our hearing on 2316, and I would turn to the revisor's office once again for a brief overview.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill number 2316 would repeal KSA 16A 2403, which is the statute dealing with financial transactions. This particular statute prohibits sellers and leasors from imposing a surcharge when a credit or debit card is used in a sale or lease transaction. Repealing this statute would allow for the imposition of a surcharge by sellers or leasors in these transactions. The remaining sections of the bill, if you're looking at sections 1, 2, 3, and 4, the stricken language in those sections is removing the reference to the repealed statute because it would no longer apply with the repeal of the main statute. And I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions for the revisor? Representative Sanders.
So would the surcharge that would be charged by the vendor, would that be subject to tax?
I think I'm going to have to do some research on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I would turn to Department of Revenue if they would like to give an overview on the fiscal note. There really isn't one, but if Department of Revenue needs to weigh in, I would welcome their opinion at this time.
Mr. Chairman, Kathleen Smith with the Kansas Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue was not asked to provide any type of fiscal impact to this bill, so I don't believe that there is any fiscal effect.
Thank you for that, Kathleen. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to the proponent testimony and welcome first to committee proponent Tom Pallas, Fuel True Independent Energy and Convenience. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Tom Pallas and represent Fuel True. We represent the petroleum and convenience industry throughout the state. Excuse me, the energy and convenience industry in the state. Hence our name change, Fuel True. Sorry about that. You've got my written testimony. This is an issue we have fiddled with in the past a little bit here and there, but this year it appears that there's a little more interest in it. The convenience stores, as you can imagine, as a retailer, accept credit cards as a form of payment. And in our world, that amounts to about 85% of all sales. And if you go to the pump, the fuel pump, that's 100% of our sales. Working with the credit card companies, I guess there is no working with. You either accept their terms or you don't. So therefore, knowing that we want to accept a payment for our goods, we accept the credit cards. And as you look at what's going on in these days, younger kids, they don't know what cash is. I'm older, and I think cash is king. I'm very old, but anyway, I think cash is king, but at the same time, I can go to my 42-year-old son, I bet he doesn't have $1 in his pocket. Everything is card-based. So everything's moving in that direction. Even with COVID, we used only credit cards as opposed to cash because people didn't want to touch it. That might be a norm for some retailers going down the road in the future. And as also with us, credit cards are really important. On your card, we have credit card theft. And a lot of times, some of that liability does reach back to the credit card company, but they put these new things in called a chip. And you stick it in, and that chip reader protects you. It's called Europay, MasterCard, Visa. And in the fuel world, we are going to be required as of October of this year of 21 to have all chip readers at our fuel dispensers. Well, many of you probably go to a pump that's electronic and you can use that card. There's a lot of small rural areas that they have what they call a mechanical pump. They don't have those. So a lot of the oil companies are going to mandate that those be done at the same time. What that chip does, it relieves the retailer of that liability. it would go back to the card company if that chip is bad. It'd be nice if they said, okay, if you want to accept the liability, the retailer, you could still take a credit card. But we are mandated by so much with credit cards that is it out of hand? Yes, but we have no choice. So this feature, this bill allows us to pass on that credit card charge, just like the state and local government does to everybody that pays their taxes, either at the state level or at the federal level as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I don't have a lot to add to this bill does, but it's a piece of legislation that will all of my people, will all of my members use this provision in the law? I'd say probably not. It's going to be that first one that does it that's going to make the difference. So this would give them the option, if they so desire, it wouldn't be against the law to pass on those charges. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, committee. I think we'll go ahead and take questions after each conferee. I noticed you had a proposed amendment of 3.5%. What is the range, the standard range of?
I didn't talk to my colleagues, but before I put that in, I wrote that last week, and after speaking with them, that could cause some legal problems down the road. But when I read the bill, there is no maximum charge in it. So what we see is anywhere from 2.5% to 3.5% is what we normally pay. And the bill specifically states you could pass on the actual charge. And I know that's going to vary based on your size. If I'm a small retailer, you're going to pay higher fees. If I'm a large retailer, I'm going to pay lower fees. And throughout everybody, I did a little brief survey, and it's millions of dollars that we pay annually in credit card fees.
And are credit cards different? Do you have a fee on debit cards? And I know there's mobile pay. You can put the thing on your phone and scan that. Are there different fees?
You have fees on debit cards that are different than credit cards. And if you want to know those numbers, maybe somebody behind me has them. I don't have those numbers at this point, but I can get them to you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Representative Highland. Next is Representative Corbett.
The trouble with the difference by your car, the retailer will not know what the charge of the card is till the transaction is probably complete. They all vary by bonus points and debit cards. And
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, basically they know what their percentage points are up front that they're going to pay, and that's just the deal, the contract that they have with the credit card company. They'll know it's 2.5 plus a 10%, 10-cent swipe fee or what have you. They have certain fees that go along with it.
Do you think this bill would allow businesses to maybe offer a cash discount? A lot of credit cards don't want you to offer that.
There are no credit card discounts at this point. There are cash discounts that you go at the pump. And in our world, with weights and measures, they tell you what the cash price is on the sign. They tell you when you're driving by a gas station, this is the cash price, this is your credit card. That is a discount for cash, not a credit card discount.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom, thanks for the heartburn there. That fee that they charge, not just the 2%, but the swipe fee, what does that run? Do you know an average?
I want to say, Mr. Chairman, I want to say it's anywhere from 10 to 25 cents.
Some of them are higher than that, depending on your volume.
The ones that I've seen in some of the members I've spoken to, that's what I asked that question.
Can I have a follow-up? So, do you guys work as a group? I know we're familiar with the grocery industry. We always went together as a group, so they couldn't pick us off by individual location. We'd go together as a group and try to buy that fee down. And I'm assuming you folks have done that?
Mr. Chairman, in our world, we're dictated by what the oil company requires at the pump. Now, I can do something different inside, but I'm at the pump. I have to do whatever the credit card company and the oil company, they have something going on as well. So we don't have buying groups like you're talking about. We have buying groups that buy fuel together, but not to lower the price of a credit card fee.
Thank you.
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious how you, in your particular industry, and I'll probably ask the other conferees from various industries, how do you envision that this will manifest itself in like fuel sales? Will it be like a notification at the pump that this will add 3 cents a gallon, or how do you see that manifesting itself?
When we post our prices, it has to include everything. So the price that you see at the pump and as well as our sign will include that fee if we're allowed to do that. Also, there's been discussion about putting on a receipt that shows you have a credit card fee. Other states that I've gone to, I've seen the credit card fee at the bottom of the receipt that shows us how much it was. And I actually like it when they break everything out personally. Whether it's if you go to a restaurant, they break out your drink tax and everything like that. But other states, they put it on a credit card, and in our world at the pump or on the signs, you'll see that price.
So if you're like me and I'm that guy that I'm trying to get an even $20 on my, even though I'm using a card, I'm not paying cash, I try to get that $20 on the pump, that's going to be the price. That it is what it is.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Pallas, a question. If there is a cash price and then there's a credit price, if you start paying kind of the fee, if the customer starts paying the fee for using the card, will the price of gas go down because that's already figured in some retailers' cash fee versus credit card fee?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that will happen. I mean, I think we're going to show our posted price, and that's what the price is. If they want to do something lower with cash, they can at that point in time, but now they have the luxury of passing that back on. They may do away with the cash discount. I don't know that answer.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the credit card price is 3 cents a gallon higher, then when this fee's passed on, would it be 6 cents a gallon? Extra 3 added on to it and no drop.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as I look at pricing on fuel, I'm only talking about fuel. Or even, I guess it could be either one, inside of sales as well. You've got your credit card price, and we're going to pay the fee no matter whatever it is. That's what we're doing now. And if my neighbor down the street is selling it under cost, which happens a lot in our world, to get people into your store, you're losing that 3%. And you could be selling gas if it's supposed to be $2 and they're selling it at $1.95, and I'm already taking a nickel hit plus another 3% hit on whatever that credit card transaction is taking place. So those fees they're not built into it. It is the cost of doing business. I understand that, but I don't think you're going to see that type of variance with your question. I hope that helps.
Just going to say, yeah, where I live, no one tries to price down. It's the same at every station in town. So just wondering.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we're getting into a different part of this whole deal, but when you sell fuel, if you have gas stations at competing gas stations on each corner, and if one guy's at $2 and the other guy's at $1.98, where are you going to go? The consumers. So I'm forced to lower my price to keep my customers. So competition dictates everything that happens in the convenience store world.
Next question is Representative Helgerson.
I'm trying to get my hands and my head around this, but you could just simply lower your prices right now or increase your prices to cover the fee, correct?
Could, if the competition allows us.
But you're trying to get a uniform, get the permission to raise your price.
We were trying to get the permission to be just like the state of Kansas and the local government.
I understand, but you have competition right now that could raise the price or lower the price. You want the state to give you an opportunity to cover your additional costs in this.
That is correct.
And basically increase the gas price like a gas tax increase. It's strange, isn't it?
I'm not even going to go there.
But that's what's actually happening. We're having a 3-cent or 2-point-some% gas tax increase, except it's all going to the bottom line of the convenience stores.
However, if they want to pay cash, they get a lower price anyway.
Right, if they wanted to pay cash. Okay, how would it work with, and I'm going to use Dillon's as the example, and this is for the customer benefit. Dillon's has sold its, I don't know whether they're Quick Trips or whatever, they're not all, but most of their stores to another company. The company, though, operates under the same brand as Dillon's does, because Dillon's retains some of those stores. If two companies are operating under the same brand, the customer will not know whether or not he's being charged possibly the 3 cents at one store or not at the other store. The only thing he'll be able to know whether or not is the bottom line price, correct? Whatever's posted up there is going to be what he's going to.
Correct.
Okay?
Next, I have Representative Prail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's been answered a couple of times, so thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Last question is Representative Corbett.
Kind of following the representative on the corner, most of these business people, you're going to build in the cost of your product to cover your price of business, whether it's a credit card or whatever. If this would happen to pass, you'd be able to give your cash customers a pretty good discount, or at least a discount if they wanted to play the game.
Good.
Now, without the cash offer, everybody's paying kind of for a credit card, whether you're going to use it or not, a little bit.
True.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I have Scott Schneider, Kansas Restaurant and Hospitality Association. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Scott Schneider here on behalf of the Kansas Restaurant and Hospitality Association. I appreciate Tom Pallas's doggedness in many things, chasing par and chasing this idea for many years. Unfortunately, I'd like to give Tom all the credit for getting this here today, but why we're really here is the United States Supreme Court in 2017 had these facts in front of them from a hair salon out of New York and decided that it violated the business's free speech right for them not to be able to publicly tell their customers what their price was. And so they struck down the New York statute and remanded it back to New York. The case eventually went away, and other courts took that holding and applied it to their district's cases. Most recently, the Oklahoma Attorney General put out an AG's opinion that says the Oklahoma statute is unenforceable because the way the statute operated, again, the business free speech rights to disclose what their price actually was prohibited by statute. So when you think about what this bill is actually going to do, first, it's a competition bill in so many ways. And then second, it's a free speech bill that allows people to compete and tell their customer what the actual price is and not hide the credit transaction. So by allowing a surcharge, which I do want to clarify, that surcharge transaction does have a contractually negotiated background. There's a settlement agreement that Visa and I believe MasterCard made in a district court that requires disclosure to the customer that they are going to be charged a surcharge on this, or it is available if they do use a credit transaction. So, and then on the receipt, there's also a requirement that that line item comes out of that receipt. So there are some consumer protection pieces to this bill that we think are fitting and the customer needs to know about. So I do hope that my testimony clarifies a few of these things. There was a question asked, is this surcharge taxed? And under Kansas law and under the Q&A that I prepared, well, I didn't prepare, I stole it from a credit card processor. The last question is that transaction taxed? And under Kansas law, it is taxed. And so the amount of the tax also includes that credit card transaction and that surcharge amount. So with that, I'll stand for any questions if you've got any.
Thank you, Scott. My first question is, do you know where our neighboring states compare on this issue and how many states in the U.S. currently allow this?
Yeah, thank you. So the only states that currently prohibit surcharging are Colorado, Connecticut, Kansas, Maine, and Oklahoma. And then Oklahoma just had their AG's opinion that says it's unenforceable. In my testimony, since we're all electronic now, I did provide you a link to the AG's opinion if you'd like to go look at that independently, just to make sure that what I'm saying is accurate.
Committee, any questions? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Scott. So, you know, I'm old. Okay, I just get right to the real quick. I'm old.
As old as Tom Palace?
I still, darn near, he's in my rearview mirror. So I still operate on cash. I take so much money out at the start of the month, and that's all I have for eating out. I really wish, I used to be in the old days, I could go places when I paid cash, I got a discount. Now when I go to pay cash, they look at me like I'm some kind of a strange character, which I don't need any help on that. But my point is, can't they give a cash discount now? If there's a problem with the credit card fee, couldn't they say, you know, because Baker's going to pay cash, we could take 50 cents off his bill? Is that not something they could do?
So that is a good question, and I want to make sure everyone understands, back to Les Mason's question also, our members are not going to use this in a large scale. There are certain attractive reasons why you use credit, but there are members who don't want to use credit and feel like they want to operate within a competitive position against the diner across the street to have the availability to use cash and to surcharge a credit. So if you want to raise your prices, yes, absolutely, you can do that right now. And many of my members are going to do that as far as they're not going to surcharge, is what I meant to say. Not that they're going to raise their prices. They're not going to surcharge because they don't want the hassle of dealing with cash, because cash gets stolen. They don't want the hassle of taking a check because checks don't always clear. They like the transaction, but there's some of our members that would prefer to operate in that cash environment.
So, one more question. So as a follow-up, so I used to be a retailer. And now I didn't do it, but there were some unscrupulous people that would take those receipts at the end of the day and take the cash, put it in their pocket, and subtract those sales from their register. And I will tell you from the corporate world, you do not want that cash because there's a problem with people who can't remember to put it in the register. So that was always the downside to cash. Then, of course, we had the checks that always had a tendency to not always be good. But, you know, we got away from cash because we couldn't track it. The tax man does not like cash because there's too many opportunities for it to go away. On these credit card deals, there's a real question if we're going to promote people going back to cash. I wonder how much support we'll really get for that long term. Just a thought. And mind you, I didn't do that, of course, because my wife did the books. So anyway, thank you.
Seem to know a lot about it, but I appreciate the
Representative Gartner.
Mr. Chairman. Hey, Scott, what percentage of restaurants take credit cards? I would say it's very, very high.
It has to be extremely high because it does make the transaction so much faster and simpler. So yes.
Do you think a number of your restaurants, if this passed, would just increase their overall prices and include the surcharge in that price? Or would they split it out on the bill?
I think well, it's required to be split out on the bill, for one, and the competition's in the bottom line. It's not how you get there. It's still in the bottom line of what is that hamburger going to cost, whether it's the surcharge is there or whether it's a credit card transaction fee of 4% or whatever. It's the bottom line that you've got to pay attention to, where the competition's going to rest.
You know, and Mr. Chairman, very quickly, I don't have, you know, it doesn't really make a large impact if you buy something small or a $25 dinner or lunch. But, you know, I'm thinking of large purchases. If you go to a box store and buy, all of a sudden you need a new fridge and a new dishwasher, and now you're talking $3,000 or $4,000 and you charge it on your credit card. I mean, we could be talking about an extra $120 if it's 3% on that purchase.
And that's a good observation. You passed House Bill 2070 out of here last week. You passed it across the floor last week.
The independent colleges.
Yeah, it's an exclusion to this act that we're just trying to strike in its entirety because of that transaction is usually larger than most, and it is very obvious to them. But how they do it is the same way we would end up doing it. We would, you know, here's your bill, here's the surcharge that's going to get charged to you, here's your total. And so what you passed last time is the same idea, but this just applies broadly.
Okay. And just one more real quick one, Mr. Chairman. These surcharges are an expense, correct? To the restaurant or to the company.
Correct.
So they lower their overall tax liability via their expenses, correct?
I don't know that specific answer, if that expense is any different than the credit card expense that you'd also have to pay them. I don't know how the tax treatment is on the surcharge versus the credit. I would assume that they're very similar, that both of those would be an expense, and there's no real gain happening here.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Scott. Have you compared the cost of the surcharge versus the additional labor you would have to be able to train your cashiers to count back cash change?
Well, the kids asking for the tax credit, the previous bill, might have to figure those out. But I will tell you that the Q&A that I handed out is handy in the sense that there are card processors that already know how to bake in that entire transaction to make sure it's accurate. And so there are processes.
Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Referencing Representative Gardner's refrigerator situation, but it's the same thing. I mean, if a guy wants to spend that kind of money and save 4 or 5 or 3, whatever your percent is, and pay cash and take it home, it's just money in your pocket. It don't have to be one way or the other. It's just giving you all an opportunity to have another tool in your toolbox. It doesn't have to be either or. It just gives you the opportunity. It doesn't cost the state a dime.
I think that's accurate. It's how do you want to go about life? What means of currency are you the most comfortable with? You know, we're going to end up in this Bitcoin environment here if we're not here already. So we've got to wrestle with some of these things and understanding what our competitive position is with regard to some of this.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm one of those people that would probably use cash, but there's no disincentive to using a credit card. It's accepted everywhere I go, and I get kickbacks from my credit card company, so why not crank it up, right? But my question to you is, I hear talk about in passing on this cost, but I just want to clarify, this is a cost right now to your businesses, correct? So this bill doesn't incrementally increase your costs. This is a transparency item as to whether that's separately split out and charged to those that choose to use that service, whereas right now, whether you use it or not, you're going to pay that cost across all your customers because that's just an inherent cost of business. Is that fair?
That is fair, and I think that's where the Supreme Court came down on their opinion. The plaintiffs didn't argue that it was a freedom of speech issue. The court came to that conclusion on their own, that credit card transaction fee that you couldn't tell your customer about now, if you did a surcharge, you could, and not only could, you're required to under the contract that you'd have with Visa or MasterCard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Helgerson.
I just want to be sure. In the discussion, I heard the refrigerator and the 3% cash. Right now, any business can offer food service, filling station, they can offer a cash discount price. Is that correct?
So
if I own a concession stand, which I used to, and I was selling hot dogs for $1, if somebody gave me a credit card, I could give you a cash price and just say it's 95 cents.
So I think people do that right now. But I also want to caution the committee that the Uniform Commercial Code was an entire semester of law school for me, and I've forgotten most of that entire semester on purpose. So I want to let you know that this bill does not deal with your question. This bill simply deals with the credit card transaction. But can you right now do a cash price versus a credit card price? And I will say a lot of people do, and that's a question that I probably want to go understand, because I think it's kind of a gray area, quite honestly. But again, I don't want to stand up here and tell you that you can or you can't, because I'm not certain of what that law is.
Okay, so there is at least what I've heard so far from members of the committee and from some conferees, that there is a cash discount available right now on any business. And if anybody can tell me if that's incorrect, please do.
Are there any further questions for this conferee? Seeing none, we will move on to our next conferee, Amy Campbell, with the Kansas Association of Beverage Retailers. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my first time to be in this committee this year. My name is Amy Campbell, and I work for the Kansas Association of Beverage Retailers. Our association represents the state-licensed, independently owned retail liquor stores in the state of Kansas. This association came into existence with the repeal of Prohibition in 1949. I haven't been with them that long, but it's almost. All of our stores are locally owned, independent businesses. Every one of them supports their communities by banking locally, buying local services, sponsoring their local baseball teams and charities. Small businesses are often cited as the backbone of the Kansas economy. The relationship between our business owners and our credit card companies are not always very friendly. As Tom pointed out, that's because our business owners have very few choices in that relationship. It would be impossible to refuse credit cards in a retail business and still be successful. But the charges and the fees associated with this service are enormous in the sense that it is a straight percentage that comes right off the top. According to a quick internet search, Kansas is now one of only 4 states that has this requirement in statute. Why do we want to be one of 4 states? This means that very small purchases made on a credit card that cost the retailer money when it's all said and done cannot be separated out or have a surcharge attached to them. A recent Oklahoma Attorney General's opinion suggests that these prohibitions are unconstitutional, but a March 2017 Supreme Court decision leaves many questions unanswered. There are 2 strategies that our association gained legal advice so that we talked about what you could do in your store. You can refuse a transaction under a certain amount or over a certain amount. That's not at all customer friendly. Or we can post separate prices or cash or credit prices on every product. This is because in a retail liquor store, you have to post the price of your product. You cannot do a straight across the board 2.5% discount. That is viewed as surcharging. At the end of the day, our members say they don't want to implement surcharges. Instead, they'd just like to be able to offer a choice. They could encourage customers to add another item to small transactions to avoid a surcharge. They could offer a cash price on large purchases for weddings. At the very least, this offers the business owner an option. Please remember that our liquor store owners are still dealing with the aftermath of the 2019 beer law. I bring this up because I do not stand at any microphone in the Capitol without bringing this up. That law shifted a significant portion of beer sales to grocery and convenience stores. And according to the January 2021 ABC report to the legislature, Kansas has 35 fewer licensed liquor stores than in 2017. 2020 has given our stores a temporary boost because wine and spirits buying has been temporarily shifted from the restaurants, clubs, and entertainment venues. We expect that people will be again comfortable going out. We certainly hope so. And so this boost is temporary. Changing this law provides a benefit to our retailers by giving them options. It will not solve all of the issues associated with the high cost of accepting credit cards or the contract language that goes along with it, but it will provide an option. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Amy. Committee questions? Representative Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's tough for me to get through a meeting without wanting to ask a question. I'm so sorry. I've been waiting to talk to you. So having lived in many different states, California and hung out in Missouri, et cetera, you see this in a lot of places where they have a sign up that says, you have to make a minimum purchase of $10 or something like that in order to use a credit card, whether that's at a bar or any other location. Do we anticipate that something like this would be implemented for those small dollar purchases that you're saying? More like let's incentivize people to want to buy something more than just a $5, or something along those lines? Or do you think that that surcharge would be added to everything across? So whether I'm buying a $70 bottle of wine or a $12 or even a $5 or, as it were, $2 chuck, sometimes they say, right?
So the conversations that we've had among our board members were pretty clear. They do not expect to add surcharges on all transactions in their stores, but they would like to be able to offer cash prices or discounts, but they can't do that right now. It's an option that could be provided. The minimum purchase thing, that's already allowed. But again, I'll just go back to this question. If you walked into a store and you knew that right off the bat you could save $10 by pulling out your wallet, do you want to know that? I mean, right now, that's not something that you can do. You can't walk into the liquor store and say, okay, I brought up this bottle, Jack Daniels, what do you give it to me for if I give you cash? It's not an option. But the point is, why shouldn't it be? Why shouldn't you be able to do that? So retailers are just given a little bit of freedom here. And again, I want to go back to the fact, why are we one of only 4 states who's still requiring this? I don't, if there is a public policy reason that it is better for the public for us to have this statute, then I'm very happy to learn what that is. But I don't see what it is today. Now, right now, you go to the gas station and they'll have on their pumps a cash price or a credit price. If I, as a liquor store owner, want to do that in my store, I have to literally post that on every single product in my store. It's just not a very feasible option for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just wanted to, because as Representative Gardner has mentioned earlier, that it's, if I want to go buy a refrigerator or something, a larger ticket item, if I were to pay cash, I'd get that, you know, would that be the possibility that I'd get that discount instead. I think of this, like you're saying, in terms of the smaller dollars. So, but that really raised a thought in my mind.
And do remember that all of our liquor stores are locally owned. And every store out there is trying to get your business because they're really up against it right now with competition. So they want to be able to provide you those options.
I really appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none in the room and none virtually. Amy, thank you for your
Thank you.
Committee, I will also call your attention to written testimony from Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber. That is everyone that I show as a proponent. Did I miss anyone that would like to address the committee as a proponent for House Bill 2316? Seeing none, we will close that portion. Committee, I do not have any neutral or opposing testimony. Is there anyone wishing to provide further testimony on House Bill 2316? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2316. Committee, that concludes our business for the day, and we are adjourned.